Iran has vowed to avenge the deaths of 290 people killed when an Iranian airliner was shot down over the Persian Gulf by a U.S. warship.
Every single day, over 100,000 flights take off from thousands of airports around the world, transporting travelers, businessmen and women, and families to their final destinations. Well over 99.99% of travelers reach their final destinations without a hitch. But that one passenger out of every 11 million gets caught up in what could be the most horrific and tragic life-ending event. This channel is dedicated to documenting and exploring in detail what causes these rare defects and what effects they have on the future of aviation. Tonight, we are recreating an accident of great magnitude in the world of aviation, where 274 passengers and 16 crew members perished. This video is in honor and in memory of the 290 souls lost aboard IranAir Flight 655. IranAir Flight 655 was a civilian passenger flight originating at the Tehran airport with a layover at Bandar Abbas Airport and a final destination of Dubai International Airport. It's also of note that Bandar Abbas Airport is a combined civilian and military airport. The first leg of the flight from Tehran to Bandar Abbas concludes uneventfully early in the morning, and the next leg of the flight is to take off at 9:50 a.m. But due to an unacceptable takeoff weight for the aircraft, the captain decides to unload excess luggage and the flight is delayed approximately 1 hour. At 10:37 a.m., the doors are closed and the flight prepares for takeoff. 10:47 a.m. IranAir 655 takes off from Bandar Abbas Airport. Passengers are settling in for what is to be a short and easy 28-minute flight to Dubai. 10:50 a.m. The captain is approaching a cruising altitude of 14,000 feet. At this time, 2 U.S. naval destroyers are engaging small boat Iranian forces, as well as a P-3 Iranian military aircraft 60 nautical miles northwest in the Strait of Hormuz, so tensions were high down below. It's also of note that in 1988, the Iran-Iraq War is at its peak, and the United States becomes involved with supplying Iraqi forces and weaponry and dispatching some minimal army and naval aid, so tensions between the Iranian and American forces were running high during this period. 10:51 a.m. The U.S. naval destroyer USS Vincennes locks onto IranAir 655 under suspicion that the airliner is an Iranian F-14 fighter jet. The ship initially receives a Mode 3 squawk code, indicative of civilian aircraft. But a second Mode 2 squawk code, which is a characteristic of military aircraft, is supposedly emitted from the aircraft, confusing the captain as to what type of aircraft it is. So Vincennes sends multiple emergency distress frequency signals out to the aircraft that ultimately yield no response. After approximately 3 minutes of contemplation in a highly stressed situation, the crew aboard the ship impulsively decides that if there is a possibility that the aircraft is a hostile F-14, then it must be eliminated. Then, at 10:54 a.m., 2 surface-to-air missiles are launched, and the first missile makes contact at 10:54:43, destroying the plane and sending a raging fireball of debris crashing into the Strait of Hormuz. The first missile cut the plane in half and severed its left wing, while the second missile shredded the remaining structure of the aircraft. None of the 274 passengers and 16 crew members survived the crash. Upon hearing the news, Iranian citizens were outraged and called the event a barbaric massacre. This event only stood to add to the tensions between America and Iran at the time, riling up Iranian citizens and fueling their hate towards the West. Later on, in an interview and subsequent report detailing the accident in its entirety, it comes out that the aircraft was never transmitting a Squawk 2 1100 signal like originally stated, but rather a Squawk 3 6760 signal, confirming that it was indeed a civilian aircraft. In addition, the plane was believed to be descending below 11,000 feet at the time by the tactical information coordinator on board the ship, but in reality, the plane was ascending above 13,000 feet to its cruising altitude of 14,000 feet at the time. The reasons given for the captain's actions in deciding to shoot down the plane include the engagement of the Vincennes with other Iranian boats, the aircraft taking off from a military airport, the aircraft was quickly approaching the Vincennes, the aircraft gave no definitive electronic emissions, the warnings from the Vincennes went unanswered, and the captain had the right to assume that the aircraft was hostile until proof it came in suggesting otherwise, for which proof never came. As a result of this accident, the US Navy made recommendations such as better training of personnel for high-stress encounters with enemy forces, and sending clear voice warnings to aircraft in order to prevent future incidents like this from happening again. One of the major implementations included a new minimum altitude for commercial airliners to dispel any possibility of hostile aircraft being present. The report reads, quote, "To minimize the risk of another accidental shoot-down of a commercial airliner, the government of Iran should be aware that any fixed-wing aircraft flying over the waters of the Persian Gulf to or from Iran is suspect as to its intentions towards the US naval units. Neither United States naval forces nor those of any other nation are capable of assessing the intentions of an aircraft in flight. Accordingly, to avoid the possibility of an accident and to preclude the possible defensive actions by the US warships and aircraft in the Persian Gulf, United States naval forces will presume that any aircraft entering or exiting over the Persian Gulf waters to or from Iran airspace will be considered a non-threat to the US forces only if it transits over the Gulf waters at an altitude greater than 25,000 feet. Small aircraft incapable of reaching 25,000 feet and rotary wing aircraft should make their intentions known by radio at least 5 miles from any US unit." Both Iran and the US naval forces made critical errors that made this tragic event possible. For starters, Iran should never have been using a dual civilian military airport to dispatch fully loaded Boeing 737 passenger planes, especially during a time of war when US forces stationed nearby are on heightened alert. Another point is that the cruise altitude shouldn't have been so low when flying over a war zone. It's understandably only a short 28-minute flight, but at least some precautions should be taken because it's a time of war. Passenger jets should have been sent higher to what, as the report outlined, at least 25,000 feet. As for the USS Vincennes, oh boy, did they make a catastrophic mistake here. The aircraft was clearly reported to be squawking mode 3, indicative of a civilian aircraft, and it was ascending to 14,000 feet and not descending under 11,000, as the tactical information coordinator suggested. Deciding to shoot down the aircraft on a hunch before it even opened fire is irresponsible at best, and in this case, it cost 290 people their lives. More than anything, this event highlights the horrors of combat and the unpredictability of people's actions under immense pressure. Civilians have historically been caught in the crossfire during times of war, and this is yet another example of this unfortunate fact. This has been a recreation of the Annihilation of IranAir Flight 655. May the victims of this accident forever rest in peace. Thank you all for joining me on this video, and I hope to see you again very soon. Please rate the video what you think it deserves, and subscribe if you enjoy the content.